Bitter rain hammered the city, streaking the sky in gray sheets that blurred the world to smudges. Under the Morrison Bridge, where concrete pillars rose from the river's churning darkness, Callum Cal Redford pressed his back against the cold wall and listened to the rush of passing tires. He tucked his knees to his chest, pulling his faded blue flannel tighter, the threads worn thin by seasons of hard living. His only possessions, a battered backpack, a soggy blanket, and a single crust of bread, sat beside him, guarded not out of hope but habit. It had been another night of broken sleep, and now hunger gnawed sharp as the wind. He took out the bread, cradling it in his rough hands, staring at it like it might vanish. The rain deepened, thunder grumbling across the Willamette. Cal's thoughts slid back to other mornings, ones with warmth and a home, the laughter of his wife, the rumble of the mill at dawn. All gone now, even the memory a kind of ache. He was about to take the smallest of bites when he heard a sound that was out of place. A soft, shuffling step, not quite human, not quite wild. Cal froze, every sense stretching into the gloom beyond the edge of the bridge's shadow. A shape emerged, a brown Mustang gelding, ribs shadowed under rain-matted fur, mane tangled, a white crescent bright against his chest. The horse paused, shivering, and Cal saw a slight limp in his step, a survivor's hesitation. The animal's eyes, alert and luminous in the watery dark, fixed on Cal. The two held each other's gaze. Cal, the ruined mill worker, and Cedar, the lost horse, each measuring the other's need. Cal's first instinct was to wave him away. Portland was no place for strays, two-legged or four. But the horse didn't budge, only watched him with a searching, careful intelligence. He looked down at the bread. He could almost hear his wife's voice, gentle, teasing, chiding him to remember kindness, even when the world forgets you. Cal broke the crust in half, and after a moment's hesitation, held a piece out, palm open, arm extended as if it weighed 100 pounds. Cedar stepped forward. The bridge creaked above as a truck rolled by, but neither moved. Cedar sniffed Cal's hand, then, hunger outweighing fear, took the bread with a slow, gentle bite. Cal felt the animal's warm breath on his fingers. Something in him loosened, some small thing that had been clenched for too long. He let out a long sigh, watching Cedar chew. The horse blinked rain from his lashes, nostrils flaring, and Cal saw the notched scar on one ear, a sign of rough years, bad luck, like his own. Instinct moved Cal's hands again. He pulled off his jacket, a sacrifice he couldn't really afford, and draped it over Cedar's back. The horse stood still, accepting the gift with only the faintest shudder. Above them the storm raged on, but for a moment, the world seemed held together by this unlikely shelter. Cal sat beside Cedar, leaning into his warmth, their breath mingling in white clouds. He pressed his back to the horse's side, feeling the heartbeat and the steady, exhausted rise and fall of his flank. As dawn crept into the city, coloring the river's surface with uncertain light, Cal's eyes grew heavy. Cedar lowered himself, legs folded under, so their bodies nearly touched. They slept together, man and horse, under the concrete arch, two shadows clinging to the ragged edge of hope. The city woke around them. Somewhere a siren wailed. The smell of rain and river and horse mingled with the cold. But in this small corner, the misery of night was replaced by something fragile, a sense that maybe, just maybe, neither one would face the coming day alone. By the time Cal's eyes flickered open again, Cedar was still there, a silent sentinel against the chill. Above them, the bridge vibrated with morning traffic. Below, the water moved restlessly, swollen with the memory of the storm. Cal sat up, blinking, his thoughts fuzzy. He checked to see if the horse had run off, but Cedar remained, coat steaming faintly in the dawn air. Cal smiled, a rare, shy thing, and for the first time in months whispered aloud, "Guess we're stuck with each other, huh?" Cedar flicked an ear, as if understanding. Together they watched the city wake, uncertain what the day would bring, but feeling, deep down, something had changed. The world had not given them much, but in this hour, they had given each other the smallest, most vital thing of all, a reason to keep going. Dawn broke reluctantly over Portland, pulling a pale gray sheet across the river and the city's skeletal skyline. Cal woke stiff and damp, his back reminding him of every year and mile he'd traveled to end up beneath this bridge. For a moment, he expected the horse would be gone. A dream, maybe, or just another thing taken by the city's relentless hunger. But Cedar was there, steam rising from his body as he shook rainwater from his tangled mane. Cal's jacket hung awkwardly across the horse's back, looking small but somehow dignified. The Mustang eyed Cal with a mixture of curiosity and guarded trust, shifting his weight off the bad leg. The two regarded each other, silent. In the growing light, their silhouettes seemed less like shadows, more like survivors. Cal stood and stretched, feeling the ache of old injuries and harder times. He looked at Cedar, then at the empty bread wrapper. Hunger gnawed at both of them, but Cal's sense of duty, long dormant, flickered alive. He spoke softly, voice rusty with disuse. "Come on, boy. Let's find something to eat." The streets, washed clean by the night's storm, sparkled in the uncertain sun. Cal walked with Cedar close at his side, the horse's steps careful and measured. People stared from passing cars, some frowning, some smirking, a few pausing to snap a photo on their phones. Cal felt exposed, but pressed on, drawn by the possibility, however faint, of food or luck. They wandered through empty lots and alleys until Cedar nudged Cal gently with his nose, steering him toward a corner store. Its neon open sign flickered in the morning gloom. Cedar pressed his muzzle against the glass, fogging the window with his breath, as if drawn by some old memory of warmth and plenty. Inside, a wall of flyers and community ads lined the entryway. One, bright yellow and tacked near the door, caught Cal's tired eyes. Missing horse reward offered. The photo was blurry but unmistakable. The notched ear, the crescent-shaped mark, even the same wary stance. Cal felt a surge of something sharp. Was it hope or fear? If he returned Cedar, maybe the reward could mean food, or even a week's bed at a shelter. But something deeper hesitated. What if Cedar was sent back to the same fate that had left him limping and alone? His pockets held little, just enough loose change for a cup of coffee, maybe. Still, as he met Cedar's expectant gaze through the window, Cal made a choice. He entered the store, ignoring the wary glance from the clerk, and bought the reddest apple he could find. The last of his coins clattered on the counter. Back outside, Cal sliced the apple with his pocket knife, offering half to Cedar, who took it delicately from his palm. Juice ran over Cal's fingers, sticky and sweet. The horse chewed thoughtfully, lips working, eyes soft. For a second, Cal felt a pang. How long had it been since he'd given anyone or anything a simple gift? A flash. Light caught from a phone camera. The shopkeeper, an older woman with weathered hands and a tired smile, had stepped outside. "Mind if I take your picture?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. Man and horse under the bridge. People could use a little heartwarming these days. Cal mumbled a protest, but she clicked the photo anyway, promising to share it with her son, who ran a neighborhood blog. Cal tugged his jacket tighter. He felt uneasy, exposed. Yet as Cedar nuzzled his shoulder, some of that discomfort faded, replaced by the odd comfort of being noticed for something other than failure. They started walking again, meandering past rusted playgrounds and boarded-up storefronts. Cedar kept close, his limp more noticeable on the uneven pavement. At a vacant lot, Cal paused, searching the ground for anything edible, old grass, weeds, clover. He broke off a few stalks and offered them to Cedar, who accepted them gratefully, nosing Cal's palm as if searching for more. The city was waking up. Kids with backpacks hurried past. A cyclist nodded, and a city worker in an orange vest stopped to watch them from the sidewalk. Cal braced himself for trouble. It came, sure enough, in the shape of a tall, broad man in a city maintenance jacket, who approached with an air of authority. "Hey," the man called out, voice rough. "That horse? City property if he's running loose. You can't just keep him here. We got animal control and they'll come for him. If you don't move him soon, you'll both be in a heap of trouble." Cal stood tall, shoulders squared. "He's with me, just passing through." The man's gaze lingered. "I'm just warning you. Folks see a horse downtown. They start making calls." He walked off, but the message was clear. Time was short. Cal turned to Cedar, his own anxiety mirrored in the animal's dark eyes. For the first time in years, Cal felt the heat of urgency, the need to act not just for himself, but for someone or something else. He patted Cedar's neck. "We'll figure it out, I promise." They continued on, weaving through the city's arteries. Cal's mind raced. Maybe he could hide Cedar for a while, or find someone willing to help. He remembered the flyer and the possibility of a reward, but couldn't shake the fear that Cedar might be claimed by someone who'd already let him down. As the morning stretched on, Cal realized the city's eyes were on them, curious, suspicious, but also, maybe, a little hopeful. He and Cedar were a story now, and stories in Portland had a way of echoing through unexpected places. That night, as the rain began again, and Cal led Cedar beneath another overpass, he felt a strange kinship with the horse. Both fugitives, both searching for a sign that second chances weren't just a dream. He pressed his back against the cold, Cedar close at his side, and let the city's restless heartbeat lull him into uneasy sleep, one hand resting on the horse's mane. Tomorrow they would search again. But for tonight, in the company of a lost Mustang and the fading warmth of shared apple, Cal dared to believe that hope, fragile as it was, might just be waiting around the next corner. A pale morning crept across the Portland sky, filtering through clouds with a weak, hesitant glow. Cal woke shivering, tucked under a pile of cardboard and his threadbare blanket. Cedar's shape a comforting presence beside him. The Mustang slept folded on his good side, the jacket still draped over his bony shoulders, mane tangled and eyes closed as if savoring the rare safety. Cal rose stiffly, joints protesting, his breath fogged in the chilly air. They couldn't stay here much longer. After yesterday's warning, he knew someone would be looking. Animal control, maybe the police, or whoever put up that yellow flyer. He didn't trust any of them to care for Cedar, not really. He couldn't explain the feeling, just a stubborn belief that the horse belonged with him, at least for now. As he stroked Cedar's neck, the Mustang woke, blinking. Cal looked into those soft, intelligent eyes and felt a pull like gravity. He remembered his wife's words from long ago about the way broken things found each other and made something new. They set out slowly, keeping to alleyways and quiet side streets. The city was alive now, delivery trucks, barking dogs, the sound of kids laughing behind fences. Cedar's limp was more pronounced after the night's cold, but he pressed on, trusting Cal's gentle guidance. Mid-morning, a figure stepped out from a battered blue sedan near a rundown row of houses. A woman in her late 50s, hair streaked gray, arms crossed but eyes kind. She stared at Cal and Cedar with a look that hovered between disbelief and concern. "You need a place to rest, don't you?" she said, voice husky. "I got an old barn out back. Nothing fancy, but it's dry. Come on." Cal hesitated. Years of living rough had taught him suspicion, but Cedar took a step forward, drawn by the woman's steady calm. "I'm Marlene," she added, almost shy. "Used to keep goats before the city changed everything." They followed her through a narrow gate, grass long and wild. The barn stood crooked but sturdy, the wood dark with age. Inside, it smelled of hay, earth, and memory. Marlene spread a blanket of old straw in the stall and filled a bucket with water from a rusty tap. Cal watched Cedar drink deeply, nostrils flaring, eyes closing in relief. Marlene handed Cal a chipped mug of coffee, strong and bitter. He sipped, hands trembling with gratitude. For the first time in months, he felt something close to peace. "He's beautiful," Marlene murmured, watching Cedar. "That mark looks like a crescent moon." Cal nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Later, as Cedar rested, Cal found an old curry brush on a hook. He began to work through the horse's tangled mane, hands gentle but sure. The Mustang flinched at first, unused to touch, but gradually relaxed. Cal talked as he worked, voice low, telling stories from his old life, about the mill, about fishing on the river, about how he met his wife in a hardware store one spring. Cedar listened, ears flicking, body still. The barn grew warm with the rhythm of brushing and quiet words. Sunbeams filtered through the slats, painting stripes of gold across Cedar's coat. Cal felt the ache in his chest ease just a little, as if sharing the weight made it lighter. That afternoon, a neighbor wandered over, a wiry man named Earl, with a gentle dog and a curious eye. He peered at Cedar, then at Cal. "He yours?" Earl asked. Cal shrugged. "We found each other," he said simply. Earl grinned, disappearing and returning a few minutes later with an armful of hay and a thermos of soup for Cal. "Word's spreading," he said, nodding at his phone. "Somebody posted your picture online. Folks want to help." Cal's ears burned with embarrassment, but he couldn't deny the relief as he spooned hot soup into his mouth, feeling warmth bloom in his belly. Marlene watched from the doorway, a small smile on her lips. "People notice kindness," she said softly, "even in this city." As the afternoon faded, Cal heard Cedar's low nicker, a contented sound, different from the anxious whinnies of the morning. Cal sat beside him, back against the stall wall, feeling Cedar's warm breath on his shoulder. But hope, fragile as it was, brought complications. Later, as Marlene and Earl talked quietly by the gate, Marlene pulled out her phone and swiped to a photo. A Mustang, wild-eyed, marked with that same crescent moon. "He was part of a wild horse adoption program," she said. "Some city lady tried to gentle him, but it didn't work out. Saw it on the community page. That's him, isn't it?" Cal nodded, dread and hope warring in his chest. "You think she'll want him back?" Marlene shook her head. "Doesn't sound like she ever understood him. Sometimes people just want the idea of a wild thing, not the real work. He's safer here." They left it at that, the questions lingering in the dust. Night fell, cool and gentle, and the barn filled with quiet sounds. The soft shuffle of Cedar's hooves, the murmur of Cal's voice, the world outside carrying on without them. Before sleep claimed him, Cal looked up at the rafters, seeing the faint outlines of spider webs gleaming in the moonlight. He felt a cautious sense of belonging, as if the walls had closed around him and Cedar in protection, not prison. He rested his hand on Cedar's withers, feeling the steady, living warmth. They had a roof, food, and, at least for tonight, a place to call home. And as Cal closed his eyes, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, the story wouldn't end in loss this time. Maybe, with the right kind of care, both horse and man could learn to trust the world again. The morning after their first night in the barn, Cal awoke to the soft, musty smell of straw and the quiet rhythm of Cedar's breathing. For the first time in years, his body felt something like rest, a break from the nervous exhaustion of life on the street. Outside, the world was soaked in silver light, a gentle Portland rain pattering the tin roof and pooling in muddy tracks outside the door. Cal sat up, heart beating with a sense of cautious gratitude. Cedar was already awake, standing quietly in the stall, mane falling in wild ropes over his eyes, his coat brushed to a dull shine from yesterday's care. The horse's gentle gaze lingered on Cal, and the man felt that flicker of hope, a feeling as rare and dangerous as luck. The barn seemed changed this morning. On the stoop, Cal found a small paper bag and a note in Marlene's hurried handwriting. "Fresh muffins, coffee, carrots for your friend." "Glad you're both here," Cal smiled, shaking his head, and brought the offerings inside. Cedar munched the carrots with a grateful sigh, crumbs falling to the straw. Cal chewed a muffin, the taste unexpectedly sweet. He watched the city's gray dawn creep through the windows, wondering what the day would bring. He didn't have to wait long. By mid-morning, the quiet lane was busy with footsteps and laughter. It started with Earl's wife, who came by with a thermos of hot tea and a box of old towels. "You'll need these for cleaning up," she said with a wink. Then a group of local kids showed up, drawn by curiosity and the viral photo from the corner store. They gathered at the fence, peering wide-eyed at Cedar. Cal was uneasy, unused to the attention. He kept to the shadows, watching as Marlene greeted visitors and showed them the barn. But Cedar, now brushed and well-fed, met each newcomer with cautious curiosity. When the kids reached out with timid hands, Cedar stood perfectly still, letting them stroke his nose and mane. Their laughter filled the barn, echoing off the old wooden beams, and Cal realized he hadn't heard a sound like that in years. He found himself watching Cedar more than the kids, watching the horse's calm, steady acceptance of these little hands and nervous giggles. It was as if Cedar knew their hearts, or recognized their loneliness and wonder, and answered it simply by being there. Cal's own loneliness, so thick and bitter for so long, seemed to lighten just a little. A gentle hush fell as one little girl, small and pale, hesitated at the stall gate. Her mother urged her forward, but she hung back, eyes wide with fear. Cal moved quietly, kneeling down beside her, remembering how it felt to be scared and out of place. "It's okay," he said softly. "He won't hurt you. He's a gentle soul, just like you." The girl inched closer, and Cedar dipped his head, breathing softly onto her outstretched hand. The girl's face broke into a smile as she patted Cedar's nose, and, for Cal, something shifted. A sense that maybe he could help others heal too, not just himself. The story of the man and his horse under the bridge began to spread. Neighbors dropped off hay, grain, even an old winter blanket patched in bright colors. A woman from a nearby bakery delivered fresh bread, and 2 high schoolers brought a sketchbook, offering to draw Cedar's portrait for their art class. One afternoon, A local reporter arrived, camera in hand and notebook tucked under her arm. She asked questions about Cal's past, about Cedar's limp, about how the two had found each other. Cal answered quietly, uncomfortable with the spotlight, but grateful for her kind eyes and patient listening. The reporter snapped a photo of Cal feeding Cedar an apple, Cedar's crescent-shaped mark gleaming in the light. She asked for one more picture, this time with the kids and neighbors gathered around. Cal tried to hide behind Cedar, but the horse nudged him forward, as if insisting he belong. The story ran online that night. Second Chances, Portland's unlikeliest duo. Within days, strangers began sending donations, bags of feed, boxes of clothes, handwritten cards. Someone started a fundraiser to help cover barn repairs. Food and supplies piled up by the door. Small gifts from people who'd never met Cal but recognized something in his story. Cal, embarrassed but grateful, accepted help for Cedar's sake, if not his own. He found himself working with Marlene and Earl to organize supplies, thanking visitors and offering gentle instructions to the growing number of kids who wanted to help with chores. For the first time in years, he felt useful, needed. He watched as Cedar, now strong and shining, calmed even the most anxious children, his steady presence working a quiet magic. One afternoon, an elderly woman shuffled into the barn, hands trembling as she reached for Cedar's mane. Cedar stood perfectly still as she stroked his neck, whispering old secrets into his ear. Later that week, the reporter returned, her face bright with news. "I know a place that could use a man who knows horses," she said, smiling. "The animal rescue out by the river. They're hiring. I told them about you." Cal blinked in disbelief, his heart stuttering in his chest. That night, as rain tapped gently on the roof, Cal lay awake in the loft above the barn. He listened to the sounds of Cedar shifting below, the steady hum of community outside. For the first time since his world had fallen apart, Cal felt the fragile roots of belonging, a sense that he wasn't invisible anymore. He promised himself, as sleep overtook him, that he'd give back what had been given to him. The story wasn't just about being saved, he realized. It was about saving others, too, and letting the kindness echo outward. Mornings in the barn had become routine, but never dull. A hush always settled before sunrise, a peaceful stillness broken only by Cedar's soft breaths and the creak of old beams as the city began to stir. Cal sat on the hayloft step each morning, the chipped mug of coffee warming his hands, watching the slow light crawl across Cedar's brown coat. There was comfort in repetition, in knowing each day started with simple acts of care. Fresh water, brushing Cedar's tangled mane, refilling feed buckets, checking the limp for any new swelling. A few days after the reporter's visit, the rescue's director called Cal in for an interview. Her name was Missy, a brisk woman in her 40s with calloused hands and eyes that missed nothing. "You know horses," she said, surveying him and Cedar. "But more important, you understand what it means to lose your footing." She nodded at a nervous boy across the paddock, trying to lead a white pony. "That's Daniel, runaway, won't talk to most folks. Think you could show him how to walk a horse?" Cal hesitated, hands rough and uncertain. But Cedar's quiet presence beside him lent him strength. He called Daniel over, kneeling to meet the boy's wary eyes. "It's all about trust," Cal said, handing him the lead rope. Daniel's fingers trembled. "You don't have to be strong, just steady. Horses can feel what you feel. If you're scared, that's okay. Just breathe, and he'll breathe with you." Daniel blinked, lips pressed tight. But he listened. Slowly, step by halting step, they walked Cedar up and down the path. Cal spoke softly, sharing stories about Cedar's scars, his stubborn streak, and how he'd once been afraid too. Daniel's shoulders loosened. By the third lap, a smile flickered across his face, quick as a bird, but real. Cal realized then how much of himself he saw in these kids, uncertain, battered by the world, not sure if anyone cared. Cedar seemed to sense it too, nuzzling Daniel's shoulder, patient and unhurried. Word spread quickly. The bridge horse could calm even the most skittish rescue animals, and his new caretaker had a way with lost souls, human and equine alike. As spring slid into summer, Cal's days filled with chores and lessons. Missy put him in charge of the after-school program, where kids learned to muck stalls, fill water buckets, and brush horses. For some, it was their first time touching an animal, and Cal remembered the fear and wonder in their faces. He encouraged them gently, never pushing, letting Cedar take the lead. The horse was a natural teacher, steady as an anchor, never spooking or snapping, even when toddlers shrieked or teens sulked in the corners. The barn itself changed too. Where once there was only dust and silence, now there was laughter, the thud of boots, the smell of fresh hay. Neighbors brought by tools and paint. Earl and Marlene organized a weekend barn raising, patching the roof and stringing new lights down the aisle. On Saturday afternoons, kids drew chalk murals on the barn doors. Cedar featured in every one, sometimes with wings or a superhero cape. One afternoon, an elderly woman with trembling hands arrived, supported by her granddaughter. She asked if she might just stand by Cedar for a while. Cal nodded, stepping back. Cedar remained motionless as the woman stroked his mane, whispering secrets Cal couldn't hear. When she finally turned away, her eyes were wet. "Thank you," she said, voice breaking. "He reminds me of when I was young, of what it feels like to be brave." Cal's own eyes stung. He understood, better than most, the quiet power of being seen, of being offered a safe place to fall apart and begin again. With summer in full swing, the rescue's director called Cal into her small office, papers stacked high, sunlight spilling across the desk. "You've done more here in 2 months than most folks do in a year," Missy said, a rare smile on her lips. She slid an envelope across the table. "It's not much, but it's a stipend. Covers your food. Plus there's a bunk up in the loft. You can stay as long as you like. Place could use a steady hand." Cal stared at the envelope, hardly daring to breathe. For so long, every offer had come with a catch. But Missy just nodded, businesslike. "We need you, and so does Cedar." That night, Cal lay in the bunk above the barn, listening to Cedar's quiet snorts and the hum of summer insects. He felt the weight of a key in his pocket, a key to the barn door, to a place that needed him. He reached for the notebook he kept in his duffel, its pages filled with sketches and half-written letters to his wife, and began to write. Not about the loss, or the days spent under bridges, but about the strange, stubborn hope that came from a horse with a crescent moon on his chest, and a community that kept showing up with casseroles and laughter. He watched Cedar from the loft window as dusk painted the sky pink and gold. The Mustang grazed quietly in the paddock, a little heavier, his limp less pronounced, his eyes brighter. Cal felt it in his own bones, a slow rebuilding, a new kind of purpose taking root where emptiness had once lived. Down in the dark, Earl's radio played an old blues song, and laughter drifted in from the porch. Cal closed his eyes, letting himself believe he might belong here, not just for the horse or the kids or the work, but for himself. For the first time in years, he had a home. Summer deepened, stretching the days long and gold across the Portland hills. The rescue barn bloomed with life, kids laughing, neighbors pitching in, Cedar's hoofbeats a steady rhythm at the heart of it all. Cal, once a shadow among shadows, now had calluses from honest work, a place at the table and a sense of belonging that felt almost dangerous in its sweetness. But beneath the hope, the city pressed in. Not everyone saw the barn as a sanctuary. Some, resentful of Cal's good luck, grumbled about vagrants taking advantage, about horses and kids making a mess in their neighborhood. And as always, there were those who saw land, not lives. It started with rumors. Missy found a notice taped to the rescue's mailbox one sticky afternoon. Zoning hearing, property under review for redevelopment. The city, it seemed, had plans. New condos, a parking lot, maybe a trendy coffee shop where the barn now stood. Cal read the notice 3 times, the words swimming in front of his eyes. Cedar nuzzled his pocket, sensing the shift in his mood. That night, a different tension crept through the barn. While Cal made his evening rounds, double-checking latches, sweeping the aisle, he caught sight of unfamiliar headlights slowing by the gate. 2 men lingered at the edge of the property, voices low. Cal watched from the shadows, heart thumping, a memory of old street danger creeping in. When he flicked on the barn lights, the men slipped away, leaving only tire marks in the gravel. It got worse. 1 week later, Cal woke to the sound of shattering glass. He rushed outside, barefoot, heart pounding, to find the front window smashed, hay scattered, a crude message spray-painted on the side of the barn. Time's up. Cedar, spooked, danced in his stall, sides heaving. Cal soothed him with slow words, hands steady even as his own fear threatened to swamp him. Missy called the police. They took photos, shook their heads, left without much comfort. "This happens," Missy muttered, scrubbing at the paint. "Whenever people start to care, someone else wants to cash in." For the first time since finding shelter, Cal felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He wanted to believe kindness was enough, that the community's goodwill would shield them. But the city's machine was big, and the barn was just a blip on some developer's spreadsheet. He started paying attention, noticing the way certain people watched him as he ran errands, the way property flyers began to appear on telephone poles, glossy and bright, luxury living coming soon. Earl, ever the realist, dug into city records and found a name behind it all. Douglas Harlan, a real estate developer notorious for buying up old Portland lots and squeezing out the undesirables, human and animal alike. Cal read articles about Harlan, noting the pattern: sudden break-ins, anonymous threats, zoning board meetings that always seemed to tip in the developer's favor. He saw faces from the neighborhood change, some growing wary, others defeated. Even Marlene, always steady, looked uncertain as she handed out coffee on the porch. "They want this land," she said, staring at the barn as if trying to memorize it. "They don't care who they have to push out." Cal's anger simmered, old shame tangled up with new purpose. He walked the paddock at night, Cedar trailing behind, the 2 of them listening to the distant city, feeling the walls closing in. He couldn't go back. He wouldn't. Not to the bridge, not to the streets. Not when he finally had something worth fighting for. One humid evening, as a thunderstorm gathered over the river, a courier delivered a heavy envelope. Cal read the bold type, heart sinking. Court notice, eviction proceedings initiated. Barn to be closed pending redevelopment. Missy sat on the steps, head in her hands. Earl swore under his breath, Marlene silent beside him. The barn felt different after that, every sound sharper, every task tinged with urgency. Cal caught Cedar's gaze across the stalls, the horse's eyes as steady as ever. He wondered what the Mustang saw in him now, fear, resolve, or something wilder. The kids noticed the tension too. Daniel clung close, asking in a whisper, "We're not leaving, are we?" Cal squeezed his shoulder. "We're not done yet. Not by a long shot." That night, after everyone left, Cal sat alone in the loft. The city's lights smeared across the wet window panes. He pulled out his old carpenter's pencil, running his thumb along its worn edges. He started sketching. Ideas, plans, ways to rally the neighborhood. He made lists of people to call, city council members to write, neighbors to ask for help. A storm crashed overhead, rain drumming the roof in a wild, desperate rhythm. Below, Cedar paced his stall, restless but not afraid. Cal watched him for a long time, feeling the weight of all those who'd ever been told they didn't belong. He whispered a promise to the horse, to the kids, to himself. "We'll fight for this. Together." The next morning, with a sleepless haze and the first light just brushing the barn, Cal stood before the rescue's battered sign and made a vow. He'd find a way to save this place, even if it meant standing against the whole city. For the first time since the barn became home, Cal found himself waking up angry. Anger was a fire he hadn't felt in years, hot, focused, alive. He rose before dawn, the city's lights still burning in the west, and paced the gravel path beside Cedar's paddock, every step stirring up memories of all he'd lost: his wife, his job, his home. But now loss had met its match. He had Cedar. He had the kids, the laughter, the barn that smelled of hope and hard work. And he refused to watch it all get erased. By breakfast, the rescue's kitchen was buzzing. Missy looked more tired than ever, and Earl nursed his coffee like medicine. The eviction notice sat on the table, a grim reminder of what was at stake. Cal set his mug down, voice steady for the first time in weeks. "We're not just going to fight," he said. "We're going to make it impossible for the city to look away." The plan came together faster than anyone expected, ideas ricocheting through the barn like sunlight. Earl would reach out to the neighborhood association. Marlene, who knew every pastor, librarian, and school principal in Southeast Portland, would spread the word through her networks. The kids, especially Daniel and the art club regulars, would design posters and flyers. Missy would contact the local press and update the fundraiser. As for Cal, he'd do what he did best: show up every day for Cedar and the community, and make sure nobody could forget what was at risk. Cal and the kids painted a giant banner for the front gate: Cedar's Day, a rally for the rescue. Underneath, in Daniel's blocky handwriting, it read, "Free food, music, horse rides, hope." They stapled flyers to every tree and utility pole in a 2-mile radius. Social media posts, spurred on by the viral news story, bounced from neighborhood pages to citywide feeds. The day before the event, Cal barely slept. He walked the barn aisle, checking stalls, laying out fresh hay, helping the volunteers string fairy lights and paper streamers. Cedar seemed to catch the energy, prancing with an excitement Cal hadn't seen since their first day together. The morning of Cedar's Day broke bright and warm. By 8 a.m., families lined the street, kids holding homemade signs, a band tuning up on a borrowed flatbed trailer. Local bakeries donated pastries, food trucks set up shop at the end of the drive. It felt less like a protest and more like a festival, except everyone knew what was on the line. Cal moved through the crowd, greeting people, shaking hands, introducing Cedar to wide-eyed toddlers and nervous teens. He showed a group of newcomers how to brush Cedar's mane, describing how every mark told a story, how a horse learned to trust after so much had gone wrong. He caught himself smiling, even laughing, despite the storm of nerves inside. Midway through the event, a commotion rippled through the crowd. A child, maybe 5, had gotten separated from her mom. The little girl stood frozen near Cedar's paddock, her face twisted in panic, breath coming fast. The crowd hushed. The music paused. Cal moved slowly, his own heart pounding. But Cedar was faster. The Mustang dipped his head over the fence, huffing a warm breath into the girl's hair, standing so still that the chaos melted away. The child's sobs quieted, her tiny hands reaching for Cedar's tangled mane. Cal crouched beside her, whispering, "He's here. You're safe." The crowd watched, transfixed, as trust passed wordlessly between horse and child. A moment so fragile, so real, it seemed to change the air itself. The music picked up again, laughter and applause rolling over the yard. Cal glanced up and saw a woman in a sharp suit, a city councilwoman, he realized, watching from the porch, her eyes glimmering. Later, she approached Cal as he fed Cedar an apple. "I grew up in foster care," she admitted quietly. "Places like this kept me from falling through the cracks. I want to help." She took the microphone and spoke to the crowd about the power of second chances, her voice clear and steady over the crackle of the speakers. Donations poured in, cash, supplies, promises of legal help. A national news crew arrived, filming Cedar's gentle eyes, the murals painted by kids. Cal's hands rough but sure as he lifted Daniel onto the Mustang's back. The story went live before the rally ended. Man and horse inspire a city to fight for hope. As dusk fell, Cal stood in the barn doorway, watching the rescue glow with lanterns and laughter. He felt the exhaustion of a week's worry, but also a deep, wild hope. The councilwoman found him again, pressing her card into his hand. "I'll be at the zoning hearing," she promised. "You've got more people behind you than you know." That night, as volunteers swept confetti from the barn floor, Cal sat beside Cedar, the Mustang's head heavy on his shoulder. The city, with all its dangers and doubts, suddenly seemed just a little smaller, a little less cold. For the first time, Cal allowed himself to imagine winning, not just holding on, but truly saving the place that had saved him. As he drifted to sleep, Cal whispered thanks, not to fate, but to every person, every horse, every act of kindness that had brought him here. Tomorrow, the battle would begin in earnest. But tonight, hope thundered louder than fear. The city moved differently after Cedar's day. Portland's usual drizzle seemed lighter. The faces Cal passed on his walks through the neighborhood more open, more familiar. Strangers stopped him at street corners, some shy, some bold, all with stories or questions about Cedar, about the barn, about the fight for the rescue. What began as a flicker, a rumor, a viral post, had become a quiet movement. People showed up with casseroles, bags of apples, stacks of legal forms, even sketches children made of Cedar with his crescent moon and tangled mane. One morning, a letter arrived on official city stationery. It was an invitation, no, an announcement. The city would be hosting a public ceremony at Waterfront Park to honor acts of extraordinary compassion and service. Cedar and Cal were both named. Missy waved the letter in the air, beaming as she read it aloud in the barn, her voice echoing against the rafters. Cal felt dizzy, the room spinning just a bit. After years of invisibility, he found himself stepping into the light. The morning of the ceremony, Cal hardly recognized himself in the cracked bathroom mirror. He wore a borrowed dress shirt and his old blue flannel, pressed as best as he could manage. Daniel, hair slicked and eyes wide, clung to his side. The rescue crew, Marlene, Earl, Missy, and a parade of kids marched along the riverwalk behind Cedar, who shone in the early sun, coat brushed to a gleam, and his limp hardly noticeable. Crowds lined the park, the city skyline etched behind a stage decorated with wildflowers. TV cameras whirred. A band played quietly as families gathered, some holding signs, "Second chances for all, horses heal hearts, keep our rescue home." Cal could barely meet their eyes, but Cedar walked proudly beside him, head high, as if he'd always belonged here. The mayor's speech was short but heartfelt. He spoke of resilience and how hope could grow in the hardest places, how a hungry Mustang and a man under a bridge could teach the city about loyalty and the power of a single, brave act. "We are here," the mayor finished, "because kindness is not just a feeling, it's a chain reaction. It builds cities, it saves lives." The applause was thunderous. When Cal was called to the stage, his palms sweated, and his knees shook. Cedar followed, pausing as if to check that Cal was ready. The city councilwoman, her eyes shining, her words steady, presented Cedar with a ribbon and a plaque, Companion of the Year. The crowd erupted. Cal, overwhelmed, tried to step back, but a dozen hands urged him forward. He found himself at the microphone, the moment slowing. The wind picked up, tugging his flannel, and the smell of river and wild grass filled his chest. He spoke, at first halting, then finding his footing. He told the city about losing his wife, about the silence and the bridges, about how Cedar had wandered into his life and taught him how to hope again. "I thought I was invisible," he said quietly. "But Cedar saw me. And then you all did. If you see someone who's fallen, reach for them. You never know how far a little kindness can go." His words drifted into the crowd, met with a hush, then a standing ovation. Daniel was crying, and so was Earl, though he tried to hide it behind a cough. After the ceremony, children crowded around Cedar, tying ribbons in his mane, feeding him slices of apple. News crews asked Cal for interviews, his photo appearing that night on every local channel and hundreds of social feeds. The city councilwoman approached Cal and Missy, voice low but urgent. "We did it," she said. "City Hall is granting permanent protection to the rescue. The barn will stay. The land will be preserved for the community and for the animals. Cedar and all the others are safe." Relief broke through Cal like the first sunlight after a storm. He hugged Missy, Marlene, and even Earl, who grumbled but didn't pull away. Daniel clung to Cedar's neck, murmuring promises of adventure and summer days to come. That evening, the barn glowed with joy. Neighbors brought pie, someone played guitar, and laughter rang through the open doors. Cal sat on the grass outside Cedar's stall, legs stretched long, back resting against the barn wall. The horse lay nearby, eyes half closed, his breathing slow and content. Cal pulled out his old notebook and wrote a letter to his wife, something he hadn't done in years. He wrote about the way the city had wrapped him up, about the second chances given, and the family he'd found in a place he never expected. About Cedar, about the kids, about how hope could bloom again, even after loss. In the barn, Daniel and the other kids braided flowers into Cedar's mane. Marlene watched from the porch. Missy laughed with the volunteers, and Earl, tough old Earl, made a toast with sweet tea, his eyes suspiciously bright. When night came, Cal stood in the center of the barn, arms around Cedar's neck, breathing in the smell of hay and home. For the first time in years, there was no ache, no gnawing fear, only gratitude so deep it made him shiver. He closed his eyes, listening to the city's heartbeat beyond the fields, and understood. Everything had changed, and everything was just beginning. Night at the rescue barn had its own kind of quiet. There were always small sounds, a horse shifting in his stall, rain tapping the tin roof, the wind fussing at the eaves. But the world outside felt far away, softened by darkness and hay-scented air. Cal sat at his battered desk in the loft, a single lamp casting a yellow pool of light on the pages before him. Cedar lay stretched out in the straw below, chest rising and falling with deep, even breaths. Beyond the barn, the city's neon glow bled into the low clouds, making the night never fully dark, never fully still. Tonight, though, Cal wasn't restless. He was writing, a letter to his wife, something he hadn't dared to do since the mill closed, since the world shifted under his feet. His words came slow, hesitant, but true. He wrote of Cedar first, how the Mustang had arrived with mud-caked hooves and eyes sharp with suspicion, how Cal had found the strength to offer him half a loaf of bread, how, in sharing that small mercy, something inside Cal had started to mend. "It's funny," he wrote, "how giving when you have almost nothing feels more important than anything you ever gave when your hands were full." He described the barn, the clatter of kids' boots in the morning, the warmth of Marlene's coffee, the way Earl barked orders but always left the last piece of pie for someone else. He told of Daniel, of the way the boy had transformed in Cedar's presence from a brittle shell to a kid with bright eyes and open laughter. The work was hard, sometimes exhausting, but it was good work. Every day Cal found new things to repair: broken fence rails, a skittish colt, a bruised ego. But there was a different kind of fixing, too. The more he cared for Cedar and the others, the more he found that the broken pieces inside himself were fitting back together. The world, he realized, didn't hand out miracles, but it did reward those who stuck around, those who offered a hand when nobody else would. He wrote about loyalty, not just the loyalty of animals, but the fierce, quiet loyalty that grew in people who had been forgotten. The barn's community, bound by hardship and hope, had become a family not by blood, but by choice. "It's funny. Love doesn't leave you alone even after you think you've lost it," he scribbled. "It just shows up in different faces." Cedar's story, too, was one of redemption. Cal reflected on the Mustang's transformation, from a half-wild, limping stray to the heart of the rescue. Cedar had shown him that trust, once given, demanded only patience and care. There were no shortcuts, no grand gestures, just small, steady acts every day. He paused, pencil hovering above the paper. Rain drummed on the roof, a lullaby. Down in the straw, Cedar shifted and let out a long sigh, his eyes flickering open. Cal climbed down, crouching beside the horse, and Cedar, in his quiet way, nudged Cal's shoulder, settling his head there as if to say, "We're both still here. We made it through another day." In that moment, Cal felt all the nights under bridges, all the hunger and the ache of loss, dissolve into something gentle, gratitude maybe, or just the simple certainty that he belonged right where he was. He stroked Cedar's mane, rough and tangled but warm beneath his fingers, and let the silence say what words could not. As midnight edged closer, Cal folded the letter, placing it with the others he'd written and never sent. He thought of all the people who had wandered through the rescue, broken or just lost, how they'd found shelter in Cedar's calm, in the barn's open doors, in the steady kindness of a hand offered without expectation. He saw now how every small act of care multiplied, echoing outward in ways he could never have planned. The next day, Cal shared some of these thoughts with Daniel as they mucked stalls together. "You know, I used to think luck was something that happened to you, good or bad. But maybe real luck is what you make for other people when you've got nothing left to lose." Daniel considered this, his brow furrowed. Like giving Cedar that bread, or when Marlene gave you the barn? Cal nodded. Exactly. It's a chain. Every good thing starts with someone doing something small, even when it's hard. The weeks rolled by, summer slipping into early fall. The barn became a refuge for more than just horses, a retired teacher looking for purpose, a single mom who'd lost her job, an old man whose apartment was being torn down for condos. Each found a place, a task, a little piece. Each left their mark. Fresh paint, a new fence, a story told over coffee. Cedar watched it all with his soft, searching gaze, always ready with a steady presence. He had become more than a symbol. He was living proof that second chances could heal not just the wounded, but everyone who came close enough to care. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and the city's lights flickered on, Cal stood at the barn door, Cedar at his side. He looked out over the fields, the city beyond, and felt hope, quiet, stubborn, undramatic, settle in his bones. He realized then that the lesson wasn't about grand victories or sudden transformations, but about how ordinary moments of care and courage, repeated again and again, could turn even the hardest life into something worth holding on to. He smiled, Cedar pressing close. We're not lost anymore, old friend. We found our way back. And somewhere, in the hush of twilight, Cal felt his wife's memory, gentle, approving, carrying him forward, step by step, into the life he'd almost lost and was still learning how to live. The river wore its morning mist like a secret. Along its banks, where the grass bent beneath the dew, the city felt almost gentle, a world remade by the soft light that spilled through gaps in the bridge above. Cal sat on an old wooden bench not far from the barn, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, Cedar grazing a few feet away. The Mustang's breath curled in the cool air, his crescent-marked chest rising and falling, mane trailing in wild ropes over his face. Together they watched the city wake. The bench was nothing special, peeling paint, initials carved by strangers long gone, but it had become a quiet anchor for Cal. He came here at dawn when the world was still gray and new, when his thoughts were clearest and hope felt possible. He'd sit and listen to the river, the hum of distant traffic, the soft clip of Cedar's hooves as the horse wandered close and nudged his shoulder. Sometimes Daniel joined him, sometimes Earl or Marlene or Missy with her quiet laughter. But mostly it was just Cal and Cedar, alone and not alone. This morning was different. The air carried the laughter of children, high and bright as birdsong. Neighbors walked their dogs along the path, waving as they passed. Two old men played chess on the grass, pausing to nod at Cal. Families gathered on picnic blankets, some holding coffee, others setting out bread and apples. Slowly, naturally, the community that had grown around the barn gathered by the river's edge, drawn not by crisis, but by the simple desire to be together. Children clustered near Cedar, hands reaching out, voices bubbling with excitement. Cal smiled, remembering the first morning under the bridge, the bitter rain, the broken bread, the silent bargain between a lost man and a lost horse. Now, as Cedar stood calm among the crowd, accepting each pat and treat, Cal felt the circle of hope he'd started widen and deepen, rippling outward in ways he'd never imagined. Neighbors who once hurried past now stopped to talk, sharing stories about the rescue, the zoning fight, or simply the weather. A young mother handed Cal a bag of carrots for Cedar, her daughter pressing a crayon drawing into his palm. An older man, face lined with years, sat beside Cal and thanked him softly. "You showed us how to hold on, how to look out for each other." This place, it matters. Cal nodded, overcome by the truth of it. For the first time, Cal let himself truly believe in belonging, not as something given, but something earned and built day by day through small acts of care. He looked out at the faces in the crowd, at the sunlight slanting over the water, at Cedar's searching gaze, and felt his pain had been transformed, not erased, but reshaped into purpose. As the sun climbed higher, Missy called everyone together for a photograph. Cal, Cedar, the kids, the volunteers, neighbors, and friends. They crowded onto the grass, Cedar at the center, ribbons trailing from his mane. The photographer counted down. The crowd burst into laughter, and the camera clicked. Cal blinked against the brightness, catching Daniel's shy grin and Earl's mock scowl, and thought, this is what a second chance looks like. Later, as the crowd thinned and the morning wore on, Cal found himself alone on the bench again, Cedar beside him. He ran his hand over the Mustang's neck, feeling the warmth, the living pulse. We made it, he whispered. Didn't think we would, but here we are. Cedar pressed his head into Cal's shoulder. The simple touch said everything words could not. Loyalty, gratitude, the comfort of having someone to walk beside, no matter what the world tried to take away. The city felt different now. The barn was secure, the rescue's future safe. Daniel was thriving, Marlene baked more than ever, Earl grumbled with contentment, and Missy's eyes sparkled with new plans. The community had grown strong, built on kindness, shared struggle, and the stubborn belief that no one was too far gone for a second chance. Cal sat quietly, breathing in the morning air, letting gratitude settle deep in his bones. He knew there would still be hard days. Trouble never stayed gone for long. But he also knew now that hope was a chain. Each act of courage linking to the next, each kindness rippling outward, changing the world in small but undeniable ways. As the sun rose above the river, Cal and Cedar stood and walked together into the city, side by side. Their shadows stretched long across the grass, blending and separating with each step. Proof, for anyone watching, that hope was not a single moment, but a journey. Kindness and loyalty heal what the world breaks. A single act, feeding a hungry horse, can set off a chain of hope that changes many lives. No one is too far gone for a second chance. If this story touched you, please like and follow the channel. Together, let's keep the chain of hope growing.